You want to know the secret of how I got these perfect little square stitches? Well, I'm going to show you. Now, for my examples today, I will be using 8-ply DK 100% acrylic yarn and a 3.5mm hook. Now, this works for both flat pieces and for pieces in the round, but it works in different ways. So I'm going to start by showing you how these stitches work when worked up into flat pieces. So you can skip ahead if you want to see how this works in the round. Let's just pack this away. So by flat pieces, what I mean is chaining one and turning at the end of each row. So we're just going to start by chaining our foundation chain. And I'm just going to go with 10 chains today, just to work up a little swatch. So there is my 10 chains, and I'm going to chain once more and turn. For this first row, I'm just going to work single crochet across. So it's 10 single crochet back across the chain. So now I have my foundation chain and 10 single crochet across it, and we're at the end of the row, so I'm going to chain one and turn. In the next row, we're going to start working our perfect little squares. And what we're going to do next is slip stitch across in the front loop only. So if you look at the top of your stitches, you'll be able to see that there is 2 loops for each stitch. There's a loop on the side facing you and a loop on the side facing away. So when I say front loop only, we're just going to insert our hook through the loop on the side facing you. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Chain one and turn. So this is what it looks like on our other side. You see here we've got the loops that we didn't use in the last row, as well as the slip stitches that we made in the last row. And for this row, all we're going to do is insert our hook underneath the front loop and underneath the slip stitch that we made. Then yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and complete our single crochet. And I'm going to do that in each of the stitches along. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then we work the last stitch in the row a little bit differently. What I want you to do is turn it so you're looking at the end. Insert your hook in the gap at the end of the row, yarn over and pull up your loop around that outer edge so that you're kind of working on a diagonal. Then yarn over and complete your stitch. Now normally these stitches will slope off in a really sharp diagonal direction, but by working your final stitch around the end of the row instead, it kind of helps pull them a little bit straighter. So there is our first row of tiny perfect little squares, and chain one and turn. Now all you do is repeat those 2 rows, so slip stitching across in the front loops, and then single crocheting across through both the spare loop and over the top of the slip stitch. And there is 2 rows of our tiny, cute little perfect square stitches. Now, there are some limitations to this, so you can see color changes next to one another can cause a little bit of dithering between the 2 colors. And I'm just going to carry on here and finish working up just a little swatch. And what I found is that the reason that those little squares look perfect is that little slip stitch behind is making them slightly taller. Now what that's also doing is meaning that a 10 by 10 swatch is actually a rectangle. If you were trying to get a square of color, you're going to want 8 rows of 10 stitches across, not 10 rows. So there is our little swatch with all of the little squares. That's what it ends up looking like on the back. So they're just not as neat as the little squares, but still like a nice, neat, uniform texture. And you'll see there that I have managed to keep it relatively nice and straight and square just by working those stitches a little bit differently along that edge. So the end result is quite a stiff fabric compared to regular crochet, so I probably wouldn't use this for a blanket. You can see it a little bit more effectively on this really big one that I'm working on here, where it's quite stiff. It doesn't drape very nicely, so maybe not for blankets, but I do think it has uses like cushions and that kind of thing, so it definitely has applications. I'm personally using this. I'm making a giant wall hanging. Part 1 is available on the channel now. Part 2 will be out shortly, so if you subscribe, you won't miss that. But you'll see that I'm doing these little details on it where over the top, and to get that effect, I'm just using a doubled over strand of yarn and using my squares as a guide here, working some little cross stitches. And the doubled over strand seems to be the correct ratio, at least when using 8-ply or DK yarn. But in other sizes of yarn, you might have to try a few things and see what works. So there, a double strand kind of covers the square nicely. Okay, so what about if your project is worked in the round? And we apply just a little bit differently when working in the round, mainly because we don't turn our piece at the end of the row, so we're not alternating the side of the work we're working into. So what I have here is the start of an existing piggy. I've just worked up like the head, and we're going to finish working up his belly. That is the difference in the stitches. So this is just me regular crocheting, and this is me using this technique. So it does look a little different. It does bring sort of a nice orderliness to it, and if that's something you're looking for, you might want to try this. So the only adjustment I need to make to the regular pattern in order to use this technique is after every row of stitches, we're going to work slip stitches around in the back loops only. So this time the slip stitches are going on the loops facing away from us or facing to the inside of the work. So this row is 30 stitches around, so I'm going to work 30 slip stitches in the back loops only. So that's 30, and this is what my stitches look like. So you can see there, once again, we have our spare loop on the front and our slip stitch on the back. And now I'm going to work the next row of instructions for this pig, which happens to just be 30 single crochet around. So all I'm going to do is insert my hook under the spare loop and under the slip stitch behind it, yarn over and pull up a loop around both, then yarn over and complete my stitch. So there's our first one, and I'm going to do 30 of those around the exact same way. Now, this won't be suitable for all patterns. It does make the crochet thicker and stiffer, and a lot of complex shaping does rely on thinner stitches that can stretch more. I will also add that because these stitches are taller, my pig is now longer. I think it works fine on this particular pattern. It will also potentially impact the amount of drift you get. So if a pattern is made all in one piece, you might have to watch out for pieces becoming misaligned through using this technique. Still, I do think it's something interesting to try. And so if the look of it appeals to you, you should give it a go and see if it works for you. And there we go. That's the row we just worked of those nice little square stitches. Now, before I do the next row of instructions, I'm going to insert another row of slip stitches just in the back loops. Now, I can hear you wondering, what about increases and decreases? Well, I would encourage you to use standard increases and decreases instead of the invisible ones. But it's basically very simple. It's just where you would normally insert your hook into the stitch, you just always insert under the front loop as well. So an increase is just 2 stitches into the same stitch, no worries. And a decrease, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull up a loop, and finish off. So it's the exact same process. It makes absolutely no difference to basic elements of shaping. All right, so I'm just going to finish off the pig now. And there he is. So yeah, there is my finished pig. As you can see, this does play a little bit of havoc with the dimensions just because those stitches are a little bit taller. And I did specifically pick the pig as my example today because I knew he would be just as cute, a little bit longer than he is as his cute stubby little self. But make sure that you take that into account when picking patterns to try this technique with. It would have been really easy to adjust this pattern and remove stitches as I went, but I just knew that this pattern here in particular would probably handle it quite well, particularly as like pigs do tend to be a little bit more long. So yeah, those are two examples. Oh, excuse you, pig. Those are two examples of the perfect little square stitch. That's all I had for you today. Okay, bye.